This episode of Sleepy is proudly sponsored by Shopify. If you're listening to this show, and you're like me, you really prioritize a healthy lifestyle. You go out of your way to streamline your day-to-day, your money, your exercise, your morning habits. Also, you can be lucid and just get to the business of living your life. And if you actually have a business, Shopify is one of those tools that after you have it, you cannot imagine life without it. It is the business behind the business, and it simply helps you run your life more smoothly. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. It is the number one checkout on the planet. Their Shop Pay features boost conversions to 50%, meaning way less left in the cart and more sales for you. And it's a perfect partner no matter what stage your business is in. Businesses that sell more, sell on Shopify. So upgrade your business and get the same checkout as some of the most successful companies in the world. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Otis, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/OTIS to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Otis. I'll have a link for this in the description of the show. Thanks. This episode of Sleepy is proudly sponsored by Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well. If you've listened to this show for a while, you know how much I believe in eating well to sleep well. And Green Chef makes that so easy. It's the #1 meal kit for clean eating, delivering organic, fresh produce, responsibly sourced ingredients, and chef-designed recipes that just make you feel good. They have this special Reset collection right now, which is super wonderful. It's full of meals that are lower in saturated fat, under 700 calories, and packed with ingredients that actually make you feel better after you eat. I'm honestly a pretty mean cook myself, and I was really impressed with their harissa chicken with apricot pan sauce. It was so good, it's so tasty, and it comes together in less than 30 minutes. And while I love elaborate cooking, it's nice to have something this nourishing without all the prep work. Green Chef really helps you stay on track during busy weeks with their grab-and-go protein breakfasts and those 5-minute salads. It's just a really great way to eat. So thrive all year with clean, easy meals from Green Chef. Go to greenchef.com/sleepyfree and use code SLEEPYFREE to get started with free salads for 2 months plus 50% off your first box. That's greenchef.com/sleepyfree and use code SLEEPYFREE for 2 months of free salads and half off your first box. I'll have a link for this in the description of the show. Eat well, sleep well. Hey, my name's Otis Gray, and you're listening to Sleepy. A podcast where I read old books to help you get to sleep. I have a brand new story for you tonight, which is from an author I've never read on the show, and it has been quite some time since I have read a story that I liked reading out loud this much. It was so delightful. Yeah, this author's fantastic, and I think it's really perfect for going to sleep to. So I hope you like it. And before we get to the bedtime story, I just want to profoundly thank all of our brand new patrons on patreon.com, which is a website where you can go and pledge a couple bucks for an ad-free version of Sleepy. So, this week's wonderful new patrons: Carol Cook, Kevin Gately, Berenti, Toby Tester, Marion Maxwell Johnson, Pasqualina Azzarello, and Adrian Landau. Thank you all so much for being a part of making this show. It really, really means a lot. And for anyone who doesn't know, these names that I just read are brand new supporters of Sleepy on patreon.com, which is just a site that allows you to directly support the people who make the stuff that you like. So if you like Sleepy, you want to support it, directly be a part of making the show, you can go to patreon.com/sleepyradio. Like I said, at $2 a month, you get access to the ad-free version of Sleepy. $5 gets you access to our poetry feed. But even if you donate $1, I really, really appreciate it. And $1, that'll get you a name read your name on the opening credits of the next show after you donate. So again, if you want to be a part of making this show, go to patreon.com/sleepyradio. Thank you. And as always, the music you're hearing is by my good friend James Lepkowski, and the cover art for Sleepy is by Gracie Kanan. Well, as I said, I've got a really lovely bedtime story for you tonight. I also want to give a quick shout out that I don't know if many of you know this, but I actually make radio stories and do storytelling that hopefully people are awake for when I'm not doing this. And if you listen to the Moth podcast, I'm actually lucky enough to be featured on that podcast this coming week, I believe. I think it's actually on the radio this week first, before it goes to the podcast. But it's a story I told a while ago that won one of the Moth Slams, and yeah, it's really fun hearing it again. But anyways, just thought I'd give myself a shout out, which is so vain. But if you listen to the Moth, maybe you'll hear my name. Anyways, back to being professionally boring and soothing. Tonight, I'm going to be reading from this lovely novel called The Green Hat by Micheal Arlen. I really haven't enjoyed reading something out loud the way that I have this in quite some time. Micheal Arlen's writing is just exquisite, and yeah, there's just something special about it. It's totally zoned out while reading it. He's quite an impeccable storyteller, but for our purposes, the style of writing is also perfect for getting just engaged in and lost in enough to distract us so that we can doze off into a deep slumber. So, that is enough of me yapping. Tonight, this bedtime story, The Green Hat by Micheal Arlen. And now is the time for you to fluff up your pillow just how you like it. Feel yourself melt into your bed. Get real comfortable. Close your eyes and let me read to you. Chapter 1. The Green Hat. It has occurred to the writer to call this unimportant history The Green Hat because a green hat was the first thing about her that he saw. As also it was, in a way, the last thing about her that he saw. It was bright green, of a sort of felt, and bravely worn, no doubt, one of those that women who have many hats affect pour la sport. I saw it for the first time, writes the author, on the eve of my removal from one residence in London to another. Although when I say residence, I mean that I was, by the grace of God and at the impulse of my own temerity, removing to somewhat more habitable premises nearby, from 2 rooms and a bathroom above a mean lane in a place called Shepherd's Market. Not that our lane hadn't attractions of its own to offer. Our lane was one in which many improbable things were wont to happen, but it somehow seemed inevitable that such things should happen here. But maybe I had better select a few of these things, that you may know the sort of lane ours was. I have seen men arrested there, and I have seen a heavy constable worsted in a fight with a little pickpocket, who was for some time responsible for a rag shop in our lane. I've seen 2 butlers fighting in our lane. I've seen a very old nobleman woo a flower girl in our lane, but whether or not she ever favored his suit or lane, I had no means of telling. One night, I fell over the body of a woman lying in the blood of a broken head, and in our lane by night policemen solaced themselves by smoking cigarettes into the crowns of their helmets, while cats, I must tell you, will never cease to sport together all about it. But it was by day that our lane attained to any real interest for a student of such things, for then it was scared to the activities of a hardy-looking man in a brown bowler hat, who with one hand would write interminably in a small book, while with the other he dealt with passing men in slips of paper known to the law as betting slips. As partner to the hardy-looking man, we are, I venture to say, already embarked on our tale, for these gentlemen will make a faint devil's chorus for more spacious happenings. Was a tall, wizened man who wore a check cap and had hair growing out of his ears. This man would stand at one end of the lane and now and then say, "Oi." When he had said, "Oi," he would light a cigarette, while the hardy-looking man would run heavily round our end of the lane, for "Oi" meant that the law was after him. When the law had gone, he would come back wiping his mouth, and jokes were exchanged with the butcher and the fishmonger. But when the law really wanted him, say twice a year, a posse of policemen would simultaneously rush both ends of our lane, and the hardy-looking man was mulcted in a fine not exceeding so much, and was back again the next morning within a yard of my door. Among his most persistent admirers was a little bent old man with bloodshot eyes and a twitching mouth, who was a window cleaner without a union, which meant that he would clean a window for 3 pence and want no tip. He liked me and used to give me racing information, but I never won anything. Now the first thing to do is to clear the ground as quickly as possible for the coming of the green hat, for Mr. H.G. Wells says that there is no money to be made out there of any book that cannot bring a woman in within the first 1,000 words. But in setting the scene in Shepherd's Market, we have evaded the necessity for any writing up of atmosphere, for that place has an atmosphere quite impossible to convey in a book, unless, of course, you were to take the book to Shepherd's Market and leave it in our lane for a few days in nice warm weather. Shepherd's Market is, in fine, a collection of lively odors bounded on the north side by Curzon Street, on the south by Piccadilly, on the west by Hertford Street, and on the east by Half Moon Street, and rejoices therefore in the polite direction of Mayfair, as you will see printed on the note paper of any of its residents. A flower shop, which was opened in our lane, lived for only 6 months, and then in spite of the gardenia gallantly affected by the old nobleman from Curzon Street every day, I, after having lived there for 6 years, was, by the grace of God, leaving on the morrow. It is late, after midnight, when the tale begins. I had been that evening to a party, for that is now the name that folks give to a dance. I am not sure why. In America, I believe, one doesn't even give a party. One just throws a party. But as to this party I am telling of, it had, with that infallible sense of direction peculiar to parties, whether given or thrown, taken a man by the nerves at the back of his head and had hurled him into a deep pit. And it was as one encompassed by that pit, deep as the playground of the 7 devils, dark as the very dungeons of gaiety, that I found myself back in my flat above the mean lane. It would be the last night I would ever spend in that flat, and I was so glad. The bookshelves had already been taken away, and books littered the floor. Books and pictures and whatnots crowded the gate-leg table, while the ottoman, with its soiled Chinese yellow cover, was a shambles of whatever you will find in a bachelor's flat if you begin to clean out the drawers. The bedroom, however, was still ordered for human habitation. Now I had no sooner cast my hat on the bed than the bell rang. It was one of those infernal things you pull at, so that they may go on clanging forever, and as it clanged, I wondered, I am afraid ungraciously, who it could be. Could it, I wondered, be anyone for Gerald March, who lived in that flat above mine? But no one, I told myself, has called on Gerald March within the memory of man, for that man discourages callers. That man knows how to discourage callers. I had no hope in pretending not to be at home, for my lights were plain to see from our lane. And in my mind's eye, I saw the hearty face of the acquaintance at the door, and with my mind's ear, I heard the hearty greeting that dropped from his parasitical and thirsty lips. He had seen my light, that man, as he went his way home from some party even more pestilential than the one which had sent me home stricken. And he would fain drink a glass of wine with me, after the fashion of pests of the night, that are hardy with the weary and thirsty with the unwary. I could, however, always order my privacy without seeming too unfriendly by looking down from my bedroom window. For whereas the windows of my sitting room faced the public bar with a leather butler and an angle of the offices of the Duke of Marlborough's fine house, from my bedroom window I had a clear prospect of our lane. Of pests, however, there was neither sight nor sign, nor of cats, nor of men, nor of any low and usual thing. Only under the lamp at the sheep street of our lane, a long, low yellow car which shone like a battle chariot. It was empty. Now I am of those who are affected by motor cars. Their lines thrill me. The harmony of their color touches me. A gallant device wins my earnest admiration, so that, walking along Piccadilly, I will distress my mind by being a partisan of this one, a despiser of that one. Nor am I to be won by any cheap thing, no matter how brave seeming it might be to the eye, how admirable in endurance. But I am to be won only by the simple lines, the severe and menacing aspect of the aces among motor cars. For economy hath charms, but not to the eye. This car charmed the eye, like a huge yellow insect that had dropped to earth from a butterfly civilization. This car, gallant and suave, rested in the lowly silence of the shepherd's market night. Open as a yacht, it wore a great shining bonnet, and flying over the crest of this great bonnet, as though in proud flight over the heads of scores of phantom horses, was that silver stork by which the gentle may be pleased to know that they've just escaped death beneath the wheels of a Hispano-Suiza car, as supplied to His Most Catholic Majesty. Downwards to my door I looked, and there was a green hat before my door. The light from the one lamp in Sheep Street fell about it, and that was how I saw that it was a green hat, of a sort of felt, and bravely worn, being, no doubt, one of those that women have many hats affect, pour le sport. Chapter 2. Do you know if Mr. March is in? Asked the voice of the green hat. But I could not see her face for the shadow of the brim, for it was a piratical brim, such as might very possibly defy the burning suns of El Dorado. I said I was not sure. I was very surprised. A caller for Gerald March. If we look up, I said, we can see by his lights if he is in. And I stepped out into the lane, and the green hat and I stared up at the topmost windows of the grubby little house. There's no light there, she said. I suppose the light below is yours. There is, I said, but it's very faint. He's in all right. Still she looked up, thoughtfully. She was tall, not very tall, but as tall as becomes a woman. Her hair, in the shadow of her hat, may have been any color, but I dared swear that she was a tawny whisper to it. And it seemed to dance, from beneath her hat, a very formal dance on her cheeks. One had with her a sense of the conventions, and that she had just been playing 6 sets of tennis. If I look surprised, I said, that is because you are the first caller Gerald March has ever had. She seemed to smile faintly, as one might in the way of politeness. Otherwise, she did not seem to be given to smiling. He's my brother, she said, as though explaining herself. The hour, everything. It's very nice of you to have opened the door. I was listening, intently. One had to make out what she was saying. Then the voice suddenly expired, and one was left standing there, listening to nothing, unprepared to say anything. It was, you can see, rather silly. One got used to it. Oh, I said, Gerald wouldn't open a door. He never opens doors. She looked vaguely about Arlen. I was proud of Arlen at that moment, for it set off the color of her hat so well. There was no doubt but that she was tired. 7 sets, possibly. Her eyes seemed at last to find the car of the flying silver stork. That car, I suppose it will be all right there? She seemed to me to lack a proper pride in her car. I said I thought it would be quite all right there, as though a Hispano Suiza was a usual sight near my door, and I suggested that maybe I had better see her upstairs to her brother's flat, as it was the top flat, and there were no lights on the stairs. But she appeared to be in no hurry, thoughtful she was. She said dimly, "You are very kind." One somehow gathered from her voice that her face was very small. "I've often wanted," she murmured, looking about, "to live in this place. You know, vaguely." "Of course, vaguely," I said. She looked at me, seemed to see me for the first time, seemed faintly surprised to find herself talking to me. I was surprised, too. Maybe it was the way her hair danced formally on her cheeks that made it look like such a small face, but it seemed to me no larger than a small size in ladies' handkerchiefs. That was why I was surprised. She stood carelessly, like the women in George Barbier's almanacs, Fabalas at Fanfaluches, who know how to stand carelessly. Her hands were thrust into the pockets of a light brown leather jacket, pour la sport, which shone quite definitely in the lamplight. It was wide open at the throat, and had a high collar of the fur of a few minks. I once had a friend who was a taxidermist, and that was how I knew that. One small red elephant marched across what I could see of her dress, which was dark and not pour la sport. "Perhaps you are right," she admitted doubtfully, not that I had the faintest idea what she was talking about. I went before her up the dark, narrow stairs, sideways, lighting and dropping matches after the custom of 6 years. There were 3 floors in the little house, but the first was untenanted except by mice. I wondered whether it would interest her if I told her I was leaving tomorrow, but I did not see why it should. She, after all, had probably just come back from foreign parts. About her, it was perfectly obvious, was the aura of many adventures. But I was looking on her in brotherly sort, interested in her because she was Gerald March's sister, for that was a most efficient man in every respect. Fancy, I thought. She said, "Ooh, isn't that dark?" "Of course," I said, striking yet another match against the wall. I knew Gerald had a sister, but I had a vague idea. I don't know why, that she was still at school. "I don't suppose," she said helpfully, stumbled slightly. I helped her. "That anyone knows everything. Is that mice downstairs? Rats? Ooh, really?" Gerald and I showed, once upon a time, a strong tendency to be twins, though there was a good hour between us, so I was told. I was at the tail end of the hour, slowly struggling up those dim, narrow, musty stairs, her green hat now and then flaming in the matchlight. She gave one worthless information in a slightly husky, impersonal voice. As we came up to my landing, I asked her if she had seen Gerald lately. "Nah," she said, whispering. "For years and years. Nearly 10, I think. Do you think that comes, perhaps, of having been almost twins once upon a time?" I did not say anything, for I was thinking hard. Now I was Gerald's friend. This lady of the green hat was Gerald's sister. Nay, his twin sister. Fancy, I thought. Where, I asked myself, did one stand? It was a matter of thought, for deep thought, and so I treated it, as she did not appear to be in any great hurry. Now while these things were passing, the lady and I were standing on my landing, which was 4 foot by 3. She with 1 foot on the stair below, one leather shoulder against the wall, and one had again with her a sense of the conventions. "You are thinking," she accused me. I wonder what about. The light that plunged through my half-open sitting-room door fought a great fight with the shadow of her green hat and lit her face mysteriously. She was fair. As though it would say, in England of long ago, she was fair. And she was grave, so grave. That is a sad lady, I thought. To be fair, to be sad. Why, was she intelligent too? And white she was, very white, and her painted mouth was purple in the dim light, and her eyes, which seemed set very wide apart, were cool, impersonable, sensible, and were blazing blue. Even in that light they were blazing blue, like 2 spoonfuls of the Mediterranean in the early morning of a brilliant day. The sirens had eyes like that, without a doubt, when they sang of better dreams. But no siren she. That was a sad lady, most grave. And always her hair would be dancing a tawny, formal dance about the small white cheeks. She smiled when it occurred to her that she was looking at me. "I know what you are thinking," she said. "I wonder." "Yes, you like Gerald, don't you?" She thought about that. "Well, what you are thinking is whether it is fair to him to take me up there in case he is drunk." "If only it was in case," I said. "You see?" She closed her eyes. "Poor Gerald," she whispered. "Isn't it a shame?" "I'm afraid," I said, "there's nothing to be done." "Oh, I know." Oh, she seemed to know that from her heart. And I wondered why they had not seen each other for 10 years. I couldn't imagine her disliking Gerald. Childish, furious Gerald. Probably, I thought, he was to blame. And I wonder if there was anything in Gerald's life for which he was not to blame. Poor Gerald. "You see," the slightly husky voice was saying, "I just came tonight on an impulse. I'm scarcely ever in England." The voice expired. We waited, and she acknowledged my patience with a jewel of a smile. And I suddenly thought I would like to see Gerald tonight. "Please," she suddenly begged, so seriously. "Won't you let me in? I'd like just to see him, but if you think—" "Oh," I said, "come on." She laughed, a little nervously, abruptly. Gerald's door was at the head of the next flight of stairs, and it was, as usual, wide open. She moved 1 step forward into the room. She stopped, her eyes on the ceiling, as fixed as lamps. Yes, those were very sensible eyes. She didn't look at Gerald. "What is it?" she asked dimly. "Whiskey," I said. It was so obvious. "But more than that, there's certainly whiskey, but—" "Wet shoes." "But that's too literary." "Oh, of course, old women in almshouses. She was talking. It was so easy to see, against her eyes. Now she was here, she didn't want to see Gerald. Now she was here, she didn't want to see Gerald. She was trying to put off the moment when her eyes must rest on Gerald. Still, just within the dingy room, she looked everywhere but at Gerald. "Lot of books," she said. I made to go, but the slightest hint of a start detained me. She suggested her gestures. That was a very quiet lady. She didn't, if you please, intrude her womanhood on the occasion. Women do that unconsciously. But she didn't do it unconsciously. She met a man on his own ground. That was a gallant lady. "Oh," she said, "oh." "Might just as well come away," I muttered. I was used to Gerald, but at the moment, at her sudden whisper, I would have liked to murder him. Here for 16 months, not a soul had come to see him. And now, before his sister, and his twin sister too, he was in this vile state. But she had insisted on seeing him. What could I do? I promised Gerald a pretty speech on the morrow. He would be more or less human tomorrow, for Gerald had those phenomenal recuperative powers that are peculiar to lean drunkards. The illness, I told her, goes in periods of 3 days. On the first day, he is thoughtful. On the second, he is thoughtless. And on the third, speechless. I could not see her face. Her back was to me. The leather jacket, the brave green hat, the thoughtful poise. But I heard her whisper the name of the inert thing sprawling half on a broken Windsor chair and half across the littered table. And it was as though there was a smile in the whisper. And I thought to myself that these twins must have been great playmates once upon a time. "Gerald," she whispered. "Gerald, Gerald." "Oh, go to hell," muttered Gerald. And without looking up, without waking up, twitched his head feverishly to one side, upsetting a teacup half full of whiskey. "He thinks it's me," I explained from the door, and suddenly I found her looking at me over her shoulder, so thoughtfully. I can see her now, the way she suddenly looked at me, half over her leather shoulder, thinking I knew not what, and her right hand spread out on her brother's arm. There was a striking emerald on the third finger of her right hand, livid against the dark thing that was Gerald March. "Only 29, she told me gravely. "Gerald and me." "Oh," I said. What could one say? "Bad luck, I do think," she murmured. I wondered, whom she was talking to. Certainly not me. "He's a very good fellow," I said. "Heredity, you see," she explained herself. "Father almost died of it. Brandy, though. He liked brandy, Barty did. They said he would die if he had more than half a bottle a day, but he had a bottle to make sure, and then he died of pneumonia." Then in her silence she was so still that I grew very uncomfortable. What was she thinking about? She was staring down at the sprawling thing that was her twin brother, the emerald still livid against his arm. "He wrote a very good book once," I said, to say something. "Yes, about boy." "Boy?" Gerald, you see, was no talker. He just swore, but automatically it meant nothing. "Didn't you know?" She looked at me again, but her eyes seemed to me masked. I was to know later why her eyes were masked just then. I said I knew nothing at all about Gerald. She passed a finger over one of her eyebrows and looked at it. "Dirty," she said. "Years ago," she said. "Before the war, Gerald had a very great friend. Gerald, you see, is a hero worshiper. In spite of his hair and everything, That is what Gerald is, a hero worshiper. And no hero, no Gerald. And so, when his hero died, Gerald died too. Funny life is, isn't it? Then the war, and that, of course, buried him. And now, those absorbed, blazing blue eyes. The sea was in them, and the whisper of all open places. The magic of the sea was in her eyes, whipped with salt and winds. No friends, she asked dimly. No women, nothing. And just at that moment I had, for the first time, that feeling of incapacity with her. I was to have it again, profoundly, but I remember vividly that it came for the first time just then, in poor, furious Gerald's room. Dingy, that is what I felt before this quiet, thoughtful woman with the absorbed eyes. Dingy. I felt, I suppose, the immense dinginess of being a human being, for there is an immense, unalterable dinginess in being human, in the limitation of being human. But why I should feel that particularly with her, I did not know then. She, too, was human, quiet, gentle, very unaware. But later, I was to know why. It was with an effort that I told her about Gerald. That feeling of self-dinginess came somehow to a point in just feeling common. For I was what Gerald was not, what she obviously was not. I could somehow cope with my time and generation, while they were of the breed destined to failure. I was of the race that is surviving the England Horatio Bottomley, the England of lies, vulgarity, and unclean savagery, while they of the imperious nerves had failed. They had died that slow white death which is reserved for privilege and defeat. Gerald, I told her, was a more solitary man than I had ever known or thought to know. I supposed he had a small income, for he seemed to manage to live. He was very shy, absurdly shy, tortured shy. She nodded gravely, and I went on to say that shyness was a cruel disease with Gerald. It was a shyness to strangers without charm, for he never could show his shyness. He must show everything but his shyness. And so it was that he couldn't get on with people, and now he had ceased to try. He just had drinks. Every Sunday afternoon, he went to tea with his aunt, Lady Eve Chalice, in Mount Street. It was Eve who really created my impulse, she told me then. Oh, here. And I found I had an empty cigarette case in my hand, and that she was offering me hers. It was an oblong white jade case, and chained to it by a double chain of gold was a hectagonal black onyx box, which may or may not have held powder. One corner of the hectagonal black onyx was initialed in minute diamond letters, I.S. Iris, she said. Iris Storm. And she smiled childishly, formally, saying, You have been so nice. I'd forgotten we didn't know each other. I told her my name, in the embarrassed way one always does tell anyone's name. And we smoked a while in silence. She inhaled her smoke with a faint hiss, and her teeth were a regiment of even bits of rice paper standing at attention, very smart and sharp. Teeth always give one ideas. These were imperious, dangerous teeth. On a middle, one was wedged a small thing of tobacco. It lay coiled there like a brown maggot, and when I told her about that, she removed it with the nail of her small finger and regarded it. She had a great talent for looking at nothing in particular, and that was the only likeness I could see between the twins, thoughtful they both were. Suddenly, from the tousled dark head on the table, came a jumble of inarticulate words. She listened intently. Gerald shivered, but his face remained buried in his crossed arms. "He's dreaming," I said. She looked at me, and I thought there were tears in her eyes, but as they never fell, I'm not sure. Thoughtful she was, smoking. "Why does God do these things?" she asked in a suddenly strong, clear voice, a most surprising voice, but I said nothing, knowing nothing of God. "Let us go," she said. "Shall I tell him you came?" She thought about that, looking at me. "Yes," she said. "Will you?" "Please, just that I came. You see, Gerald doesn't, well." She smiled somewhere in those eyes. "Let us say he is against me." We were in the doorway of the soiled room of the drunkard. I was going to switch out the light. Often I would come upstairs and switch out Gerald's light. "Gerald," she said suddenly in that strong voice, and I thought of a prefect's voice at school, down the corridor of a dormitory. Goodbye to Gerald. "You see," she said to me, "Gerald and I are the last marches, and we ought to stand together. Don't you think so?" "Yes, you ought," I said gravely. One hand, the hand of the great emerald, hung against her leather jacket. "Certainly you ought," I said, and raised the hand to my lips. Her hand smelt dimly of petrol and cigarettes, and a scent whose name I shall now never know. "These defiant courtesies," she said thoughtfully. "They're very nice, I always say." Chapter 3. Slowly, she first went down the narrow stairs to my landing. In the sudden flare of my match, there was revealed a 3-penny bit of flesh just above the heel of her left shoe, and I had on occasion to rebuke myself on the depravity that is man. She said over her shoulder, "Hilary Townsend has told me about you." "But he has never told me about you." "Oh, he would if you provoked him." "And may I?" But she did not seem to hear. Once Hilary had, I thought, said something about Gerald March having a sister, but I had not connected the vaguely heard name of Mrs. Storm with her. I don't know why, but I had always imagined Gerald's sister as a schoolgirl, living somewhere in the country with a bankrupt old gentleman called Lord Portley, Gerald's uncle. We were on my small landing now, in a light that plunged out of the half-open door of my sitting room. She with a foot on the stairs leaning downwards, away. "Goodbye," she said. "Really, I think you've been very kind." She seemed to me very nice and gentle. Yes, nice. And then it seemed to me that across her gentleness flamed a bar of fire. She walked, impersonally, in the fires of herself. I was on another planet. Hilary tells me now that he also had that feeling with her. But Hilary must have struggled against it, whereas I am incapable of struggling against any feeling. "Goodbye," I said. I was looking not at her, but through the half-open door into my room. There lay the disorder of my life, the jumble, the lack of purpose, the silence, and the defeat of my life. I wasn't, it seems almost an intrusion to say, very happy in those days, but that is by the way in the history of Gerald March and Iris Storm. Now here's the difficult part of this history. Of many gaps it will contain, this seems to me the most grave, the least excusable. One should write, if not well, at least plausibly, about the things that happen. And yet, I cannot be plausible about this, because I do not know how it happened. I mean, how she came into my room and sat down. I did not ask her. Did she want to? Mrs. Storm was a lady who gave you a sense of the conventions. Mrs. Storm was and yet, I do not know anything about her. I am trying, you can see, to realize her, to add her together, and of course failing. She showed you first one side of her and then another, and each side seemed to have no relation with any other. Each side might have belonged to a different woman. Indeed, since then I have found that each side did belong to a different woman. I have met 100 pieces of Iris, quite vividly met them since I last saw her. And sometimes I have thought of her foolishly, of course. But shall a man be wise about a woman? As someone who had by mistake of the higher authorities strayed into our world from a land unknown to us, a land where lived a race of men and women who, the perfection of our imperfections, were awaiting their inheritance of this world of ours, when we, with that marvelous indirectness of purpose, which is called being human, shall have finally annihilated each other in our endless squabbles about honor, morality, and nationality. We have all of us a crude desire to place our fellows in this or that category or class. We like to know more or less what they are, so that maybe we may know more or less what we shall be to them. But even with the knowledge that she was Gerald's sister, she was 29 years old, that she was the nieces of Lord Portally, you could not, anyhow, I couldn't, place Mrs. Storm. You had a conviction, a rather despairing one, that you didn't fit anywhere, to any class, nay, to any nationality. She wasn't that ghastly thing called bohemian. She wasn't any of the ghastly things called society, county, upper, middle, and lower class. She was, you can see, some invention, ghastly or not, of her own. But she was so quiet about it. She didn't intrude it on you. She was just herself, and that was a very quiet self. You felt she had outlawed herself from somewhere. But where was that somewhere? You felt she was tremendously indifferent as to whether she was outlawed or not. In her eyes you saw the landscape of England, spacious and brave, but you felt unreasonably certain that she was as devoid of patriotism as Mary Stuart. She gave you a sense of the conventions, but she gave you, unaware always, impersonal always, and those cool, sensible eyes, a much deeper sense that she was somehow outside the comic, squalid, sometimes almost fine laws by which we judge as to what is and what is not conventional. That was why, I am trying to show, I felt so profoundly incapable with her. It was not as though one was non-existent. It was as though, with her, one existed only in the most limited sense. And I suppose she affected me particularly in that way simply because I am a man of my time. For that is a limitation a man can't get beyond, to be of his time, completely. He may be successful, a man like that. Indeed, should he not blow his brains out if he is not? But he who is of his time may never rise above himself. He is the galley slave working incessantly at the oars of his life, which reflects the lives of the multitude of his fellows. Yes, I am of my time. And so I had, with this woman, that profound sense of incapability, of defeat, which any limited man must feel with a woman whose limitations he cannot know. She was in that phrase of Mr. Conrad's, which can seem so little or so much. She was of all time. She was, when the first woman crawled out of the mud of the primeval world. She would be when the last woman walks towards the unmentionable end. Goodbye, I said. And then, as I looked from the disordered room and my disenchanted life at her, the eyes in the shadow of the green hat were brilliant with laughter, so that I was stunned. Why are you laughing? I asked. Or perhaps I did not ask that. Perhaps she had not been laughing at all. For when I was recovered from my stupor, her eyes were quite grave and dark as in a crypt. I pushed open the door of my room. How I would like, she said, that husky voice, a glass of cold water. That was what she said. And so I let her go in alone into the sitting room, whilst I turned on the tap in the bathroom. Fiercely and long, I let the water run, pleased with the way it was filling the little house with its clean roar, pleased with the clean scent of the rushing water, which is always like the scent of cool sunlight. Then she said, "You have had a quick bath." And so we became friends. She stood among the littered books on the floor, looking round at the disorder, like a tulip with a green head. She sipped the water, looking round wisely over the rim of the tumbler. I explained that I was leaving tomorrow, and therefore the disorder. We talked. In that disordered room, so littered with books that you might hardly take a step without stumbling over one, it was not difficult talk. Indeed, it is never so easy to talk about my books as when they are about the floor, so that you may turn them over with your foot, see what they are, pick them up, and drop them anywhere with no precious nonsense as to where they should exactly go. She waved her glass of water about, sipping it. A drop of water clung like a gem to the corner of her painted mouth. It was not fair. Talking with her in that room was like talking with her as we talked on a windy heath. She threw out things. You caught all you could of them. Then you threw something back. Now and then something would turn up in a voice which was suddenly strong and clear. And every time her voice was so strong and clear that you were surprised that you did not hear so well as when she spoke inaudibly. She had none of the organized, agonized grimaces of the young lady of fashion. But one knew she was not a young lady of fashion, for she hadn't a sulky mouth. Hers was that random, uninformed, but severely discriminating taste which maddens you. You try unsuccessfully to think that there is nothing at the back of it, nothing but a misty criterion of enjoyment. She used some words as though she had never heard anyone else using them. Nice, for instance, she used in a calmly immense sense. The word seemed turned topsy-turvy, and to turn everything else topsy-turvy. She used the word common, I think, to denote a thing attempted and achieved scratchily. Mr. Ernest Brahma was, for instance, not common. The Miss Clemence Dane in legend was. Oh, come, I said, for to me legend is an achievement in literature. All those women talking and dissecting and yearning together, she said. Their breath smells of, red hair. She thought Miss Romer Wilson was among the greatest writers of the time, the Grand Tour particularly. She was loyal to girlish admirations for Mr. Locke, Mr. Temple Thurston, Oscar Wilde. D.H. Lawrence was nice. Nice, I said. Well, wonderful, she said, with wide eyes, so that I was made to seem slow and stupid. M. Paul Morand was common, a stunt writer. I detest the word stunt, I said. That is why, she said, I used it about Monsieur Morand. He is an abbreviation, like nighty for nightshirt. I did not agree with her. She did not like abbreviations, even lunch for luncheon. What, she asked, is the hurry? I could not tell her. She thought that perhaps English was not the language for abbreviations and diminutives. She deferred to my judgment about that, and I said what I said. One just didn't discuss Barry. There he was. You can't laugh me out of him, she smiled, by calling him whimsical. She had once enjoyed a book by Mr. Compton Mackenzie, a garden catalog called Guy and Pauline. There was Hergesheimer. She put up a gallant, insincere defense for the Majesties, but it turned out that she never read any and wasn't at all sure what they were. They're short for poetry, I said coldly, like nighty for nightingale. But perhaps the book she was most profoundly liked was The Passionate Friends, with perhaps the last part of Tonabunga. And of course, she said, The Good Soldier, Mr. Ford Madox Hueffer's amazing romance. From a table she picked up Joyce's Ulysses, looking at it vaguely, dropped it absently on the floor amongst the others. I held a watching financial brief for it. One was to find her later, that she was completely without a sense of property, either her own or other people's. Thank you for listening to Sleepy. Good night.